Hello, everybody. My name's Joe Briley. Welcome to the latest ethical, legal, and psychosocial aspects of transplantation. That's ELPAT podcast. My guest today is Frederike, who is the incoming chair when the current things change in ELPAT. And she's going to have a podcast session with us. We're going to talk about the future of ELPAT. So, Frederike, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you about ELPAT.
Excellent. So, Frederike, could you start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your work in organ transplantation?
Of course. My background is in criminology and in international law. And soon after graduating, I started working already at Erasmus Medical University Center at the kidney transplant unit. So I've been working here for 16 years to the day, I think, today. And I almost exclusively focus on researching the illegal trade in human organs.
Wow.
And in addition to that, I've been involved with ELPAT also for many years. Mostly my work is focusing on studying different aspects of this trade.
We'll come on to talk about your own work in that field, but I guess we're hearing on this podcast about ELPAT and its role. But could you tell us a bit about the specific working group you're part of and work you've done and what's been going on with that group?
So I've been involved with or an active member with the Organ Trade and Trafficking Working Group since its inception in 2008. And the group has had different compositions of people over the years, but we do have a fairly core group of members who's been active also from the beginning. And I would say that the bulk of our work has centered around an EU-funded project that ran between 2012 and 2016. Also known as the HOT project, in which we travel to various countries globally to collect fascinating data on organ purchase, on the experiences of prosecutors and investigators with organ trafficking cases. We also interviewed many transplant professionals. And I would say that in addition to doing research, an important aim of our group is also to use that data to improve responses to the organ trade, usually in the form of policy recommendations, advisory reports, and so forth.
Fascinating. I guess in terms of the broader transplantation environment, thinking about trafficking and organ trade is one of the main things to kind of keep public faith in organ donation and transplantation, I guess, in many countries. So, have you any more specific information about the work you've done?
So our group is quite a multidisciplinary group consisting of not only researchers, but also of investigators and prosecutors. So, for instance, one of the works that we did was collaborating with police forces in establishing a toolkit for investigators, prosecutors, but also, for instance, staff of hotels, staff at airports, customs, essentially guiding them or giving them a tool that helps them to identify suspicious cases of organ trade, essentially, focusing on signals on what to look for. For instance, identifying a potential case of a patient who has purchased an organ transplant abroad and returns with that implanted organ. So how would, for instance, airport customs or transplant professionals be able to identify such a case? We've also drafted recommendations that were essentially tailored for law enforcement and transplant professionals and improving ways for them to collaborate. For instance, through reporting tools that allow transplant professionals to safely and anonymously report vital information that can then help law enforcers to disrupt ongoing organ trafficking networks that are going on around the world. So bringing together different parties, different stakeholders, and getting them to collaborate on these reports was, I would say, a major achievement within ELPAT.
Yeah, it's astonishing stuff. And I guess in many of the other groups that we're having podcasts for, or people that research in those groups, it's people involved with end-of-life care, deceased donation, philosophers, lawyers, ethicists, and clinicians. But you're bringing people in who may not know they were interested in organ donation and transplantation until your group approached them. You're talking about people working in airports and things like that. I think that's really interesting. How did you kind of make them understand that this was something really important to them? I'm really interested in that.
What we did was mainly when we were conducting our criminal case studies. So we traveled to countries where there had been prosecuted cases, and so we spoke with the police, the investigation and prosecution teams in each of these countries that were dealing with these cases hand on, and they would then also have contacts within those countries that were involved in helping them uncover the case. And what we did essentially was invite them at the end of our research project to attend and speak at an international symposium that we organized at the headquarters in Europol in The Hague here in the Netherlands. And I think almost 300 or 250 people attended, most of whom were from countries that had dealt with these cases hands-on. And so they had an interest, a personal and professional interest, I guess you could say, to be there and participate. Oh, are you still there, Joe?
Apologies, my mute was on, a mistake of...
Sorry.
Do you think, Frederike, this is an increasing problem, or do you think it's something that's always going on and about the same, or maybe the detection's going up, or are we seeing more pushes in terms of affluent people wanting organs and others, vulnerable people maybe feeling this is a way of improving their own life? What do you think?
It's very difficult to say because of an absence of quantifiable data. Mainly due to the lack of well, I wouldn't say lack, but there's limited research going on the organ trade when compared to other demand-driven crimes. The same goes for prosecutions of the organ trade. This number is dismally low compared to prosecutions of other types of crimes. And we essentially we're missing data. We're missing databases of reports that we can then use to make measurements of scale. So we really have to work with what is very vague numbers and rough estimates that are not, and I would say they are not reliable. My guess, however, based on, maybe it's not a guess, but my observation based on my research is that it does seem to become more hidden and more concealed due to recent attention. At least on paper, there's more attention in laws. There is more legal attention on cracking down on organ trade. So my observation is that it's actually become more hidden and more concealed, making it even more difficult and riskier to research, actually. But one can imagine that given the growing demand for organs, especially the growing demand for kidneys globally, and the kidney trade is the most commonly reported form of organ trading, especially trading living donor kidneys. So given that this demand is on the rise, but also given the fact that global inequalities are increasing, one can speculate that that will only enhance proliferation of the organ trade.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a very nice book published last year, Alif Shafak, There Are Rivers in the Sky, and this featured in one of the characters, one of the plot lines, and it really was about that, very, very much as you say, affluent people requiring kidneys and kind of, really trying to sidestep other processes. I guess ultimately the best way to tackle this, as well as criminal, is to improve organ donation and transplantation in general. I guess that's it's filling a need where there are not organs for transplantation for people, but it's the inequity. I think you put that very nicely. There's a real inequity of those who can kind of use resources to kind of sidestep systems that exist for good reasons. So, yeah,
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But and I would add also to really focus on reducing vulnerabilities and inequalities, also on the seller's side, as one might say, to prevent people from.
Yeah, I guess that's a super hard one, though, probably outside the realm of ELPAT. But it's a really tough space. I'm sure you're right. Yeah. I guess maybe moving away from that a little, as ELPAT's kind of vice chair, I'm really interested in what you think are the hot topics in transplantation that we really need to turn our attention to. We've heard from other people in podcasts about machine perfusion, NLP, faith, culture. But I wonder, maybe in your area particularly, and then more generally, what do you think we're going to be talking about, I don't know, in these podcasts in 5 years' time? What do you think?
I would say that one of the topics that lies close to my heart and I'm very curious about, and it's not necessarily a hot topic because it's been debated for decades, which is the question whether we should or should not incentivize or reward organ donations. Yeah. But what is new, what is hot, I guess you could say, is the fact that the US is now considering running a pilot that focuses on incentivizing prospective living kidney donors with tax benefits of up to $10,000 a year. Mm. And as you can imagine, I'm very curious to learn whether, what the effects would be of this pilot. So I would say that the actual implementation of experiments, so not just talking about it, but actually drafting proposals, legal proposals, and proposing them to Congress would be a development that is rather new, and that I would be, very interested to learn more about in the forthcoming few years. Another hot topic, which doesn't, it's not something that I focus on in my day-to-day work, but it's definitely a topic that, for instance, will feature on the program of our upcoming ELPAT conference in October of this year in Spain, is xenotransplantation. One might argue that it is the future, but others could argue that it is already happening now, that we are already conducting actual xenotransplantations. Also AI in organ transplantation, I would say, I was just reading about this today. The Mayo Clinic is already conducting research on the effect of AI in organ transplantation. So that is also one of the topics that will be addressed. Let me think, what else is there?
I've got a big one to push you on in a moment, but I'll tell you what, just for people who are listening and to firmly date this podcast, the ELPAT Congress will be in Sevilla on Thursday, the October the 9th to the 12th. So please come along, have a look on the website of the SOT and ELPAT, easily findable in the Google search. And it'd be wonderful to see as many of you there as possible. And abstract submission will be opening soon with all these topics available to submit abstracts for our Congress, which would be great. I was going to ask you, because I think one of the big ones that it's almost not sexy like AI and Xeno, but I actually think how we staff organ transplantation going forward is going to be almost the biggest question in terms of healthcare funding. And I was talking with some of our transplant teams here in the UK. We have very centralized, say, children's heart transplants, which means there are 2 centers. But that kind of means you end up with surgeons doing incredibly long hours and having to cover on call rosters. And the balance, for many of us in ICU, for instance, and other spaces, there are many people who can do our job. But if you're a heart transplant surgeon, there's not so many. And how we think about staffing units going forward, I think, is really difficult. Have you thought about that, or any suggestions? How do we fix that?
I absolutely agree with you that this is a topic that deserves a lot of attention. But I'm not an expert on this. I'm not one to. I don't have any.
Yeah.
But I don't have any ready policy recommendations for that. But what I can say is that this issue is probably becoming global, as also now here in the Netherlands, as well as in the US. We are now experiencing a declining popularity, one might argue, of transplantation with prospective medical professionals. So students who are, also not really being, I'm trying to find the right words. One of the issues is that medical students are also not introduced with the fascinating phenomenon of organ transplantation during their studies as much as they should be, I would say, which definitely does not help.
Great. And work-life balance is another thing, right? So, it's one of those work hard, great rewards and wonderful, wonderful help provided to people on the planet, which is why we're all interested in it, because it's something that's really positive. But it is something that kind of takes a lot out of the professionals involved in it, whether that's ICU nurses, the psychologists, people investigating in the research field. It's pretty full on at times, isn't it? I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think today's generation or younger generations are not as inclined anymore, do not feel as inclined anymore to take on jobs that completely exhaust and drain them. So indeed, thinking of ways in which we make the medical profession still attractive for people, while indeed, as you say, maintaining their balance is crucial.
Yeah, I think that's probably an important way to think about this. It's how to incentivize people to realize the rewards, and maybe we have to think about mentorship and bringing in some of those rewards sooner, I guess, earlier in career. And as you say, the advertising to medical professionals how great a speciality this is, because it doesn't really have curriculum in kind of med schools and other places. So it's really, really crucial, isn't it, to think about that. And the same for nurses as well, and all the other professionals involved. How do we make sure they come and stay? That's the $1 million question, or maybe it should be $1 billion question. Who knows?
Well, I think, to add to that, and there was a paper about this in the Dutch, or an article about this in the Dutch newspapers just last week, is that our demographics are changing rapidly. So we have a declining birth rate, but increasing numbers of immigration, so people coming from abroad to live and work in the Netherlands. And economists have calculated that the loss of our brain drain within the Netherlands, because we don't offer highly educated migrants highly educated jobs, like they are usually doing the more lower skilled jobs, that this also costs our society millions every year. Whilst we know that we have highly educated people from Syria, let's say from Ukraine, who were working as doctors, as surgeons in those countries, who are now doing jobs that are far beyond their skills and capabilities, which I think is also definitely something that should be addressed.
That is an excellent point. And this is an underused resource for our societies, right? These people have been doing the jobs, and because of maybe archaic guidelines and, protectionism, maybe, we can go the whole way on an ethics podcast, can't we? That people are kind of not being allowed to do the job they've been trained to do, having been through incredibly tough circumstances, often to come to different countries. But there we go. One question going forward for regulators, I guess. But I guess the more the lack of people able to do the job becomes an acute issue, the more creative solutions will have to be found, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
So, Frederike, we're probably coming to the end, but I guess one question I'm asking people is, how do you keep going in your role? Because you've just told me about your Christmas period offline, filling in a very, very arduous long grant application. And again, that's the sort of thing that, it's quite a lot of work, and there's lots of encroachment into all our personal lives in this area. How do you keep yourself going?
I think definitely the passion that I have for my research subject, the organ trade, which continues to fascinate me throughout my career so far. It helps that I don't have a job that requires me to be operating during night hours. I'm not a clinician, so that gives me a bit more work-life balance, perhaps, than many of my medical colleagues here at the hospital. I guess a general feeling of urgency, perhaps, that we need more knowledge, we need more awareness of what is or what remains a very neglected crime, and a very clear vision of using that research data to improve responses. And I try to do that with a great deal of enthusiasm. And I also understand that in order to achieve those goals, one needs funding. So that is also what keeps me applying.
So I guess just to finish off, the title of the podcast was about the future of ELPAT. Any other thoughts about anything else you'd like to discuss about ELPAT's future or issues in organ donation and transplantation we need to maybe think about going forward? We've touched on quite a lot. Anything you'd like to add in?
Definitely. I mean, I started working at Erasmus all those years ago, but my main role at the time then was to coordinate ELPAT. So one of my first jobs was actually to help establish and set up ELPAT as a European platform, and to organize the first ELPAT conference, which was in 2010 back then. And one of the visions and aims I've always had, and ELPAT has always been very close to my heart also for that reason, is to really help ELPAT grow and become what I would say perhaps is an expert think tank, and not just thinking in the literal sense of the word. We do much more than just think, but as an expert pool that transplant organizations, but also governments and other types of institutions can go to for information, knowledge, help, and advice on all different aspects, ethical, legal, psychosocial aspects of organ transplantation that one could think of. And I think the fact that we have these wonderful active working groups who are now also collaborating on organizing what is going to be the 6th ELPAT Congress is a wonderful way for ELPAT to continue to grow in that sense, and to preserve also its unique multidisciplinary nature.
On that wonderful comment at the end, I'd like to thank Frederike for joining us on the ELPAT podcast, and say that basically we'll put the links to the HOT project and other publications from that group in the link below and on the podcast page. And I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Joe.